see all of you. We're thankful that you've come. I know it's always difficult on the week of work. You're running here. Have you eaten? Have you not? It's always difficult, but it's always rewarding. I don't know about you, but I take a lot from seeing each of you here this evening, and I hope that you also are encouraged by seeing your brothers and sisters and the kind of commitment that they have to studying God's Word. Tonight we're going to be talking about being dateable. We are in this next few weeks going to be talking about some ideas or some concepts from the book of the Song of Solomon. Now, we're still kind of on the front end of that because Song of Solomon deals with the dating process and marriage, not so much the preparation side of the dating process. And that's what we're going to be more dealing with this week, but we are going to be taking a thought from the Song of Solomon, and we are going to be thinking about being the kind of people that we ought to be in the dating process. It might seem like a strange picture and an even stranger title, but it is true that the search for love, the search for the right person, as so often is said, really begins inside, or it should. As you think about this, I want to share with you a story that makes me look good, and I'm not going to share it with you just because it makes me look good, though hopefully you'll see that as we tell the story, but I do feel a little bit good telling this story. My wife used to be working as a personal trainer at a gym in Australia. And when she was working there, one of her coworkers would notice on regular occasions, if you know anything about my wife, she is very complimentary, which one is it? I don't know. But she says a lot of good things about me, and certainly makes me feel good. And even those of you who are her Facebook friends, people have told me this, you get tired of being my wife's Facebook friend because she just says a lot of good stuff about me all the time on there. I don't even know, so it's just very nice, like I said. But anyway, she says all these things about me to her coworker, and her coworker says, "I wish I could find a man like that." Well, in the course of talking with her coworker, she learned where her coworker had gotten her last ex-boyfriend from. Where had she found her last ex-boyfriend? At a burlesque club. And if you don't know what a burlesque club is, it's where women go and they take off their clothes, basically. Something a little bit shy of it totally being a strip club, or where they take off all their clothes. But nevertheless, that's basically what they do. They take off their clothes. And so she had met a man at a place where women go and take off their clothes. Is that a good place to meet your future Mr. Right? Not only that, but she came to find out in the course of talking to this coworker that she was planning herself on taking burlesque dancing classes with the goal of supplementing her income as a personal trainer with this burlesque dancing. Is that a wise thing? Is that a smart thing? What that story reveals to us, other than making me look good, because obviously she's looking for a man like that, the issues that come out of that are two. One, she was looking in the wrong places. You cannot find the right person while you are looking in the wrong places. We're going to be talking more about finding the right person, in other words, who to look for, what kind of characteristics, what kind of qualities, and how to go about it next week. But what I want to deal with this evening is the second issue. The second issue is that she was turning herself into the wrong kind of person. I would like to think that if there were someone that were like me out there, and hopefully more handsome and better looking and even better than I am, but if there was someone like me out there that were not married and were looking for someone, I would like to think that they would not be looking for someone that was a burlesque dancer. I know I wouldn't. I would like to think that they are looking for someone who has equipped themselves to be the right kind of person. As you think about the idea of searching for a marriage partner, we often think about it totally wrong in today's society because we treat it like we're at the grocery store. And we go down the grocery store aisles and we see, oh, there's this, maybe I like these ingredients or I like this product. This is kind of fresh, this is kind of new. And we kind of go and we have this pick and choose mentality, like we are the only party that's to be considered here. We go about the process of dating really in a very selfish, self-centered way. We are really only considering what we want and trying to gain what we want. And with that kind of attitude, it's nothing for you. And you know how it happens in the grocery store, that as you're walking along, you see a good product and you put it in your basket, but then you have the pre-buyer's remorse. And before you even buy it, you put it back on the shelf and you find another product that looks more appealing to you. And that's how so many people approach the idea of dating. Well, that is setting yourself up not only for failure in dating, but second, for failure in marriage. That's not the way to go about it. Now, we talked last week about the idea of proving things that are excellent. And even when something is right, there are different degrees of right. And along these lines, I want to expose you to this thought relative to kind of going about the process of picking someone to date and eventually, therefore, to marry. As you're thinking about searching for a marriage partner, it is good, and I'll be the first to say, it is good to find someone who you're attracted to and someone who you are compatible with. I have a friend who kind of lives by this motto in dating, and that is, when you're married to them, you have to wake up to them the next day. And obviously, therefore, there have to be someone who appeals to you along those lines, someone that you find attractive along those lines. But in terms of compatibility, I'll tell you something interesting, and I hate to use myself as examples all the time, but this is not negative or positive. Use myself as an example all the time, but anyway. Before we got married, we were talking, Chantel and I were talking about our likes and dislikes. You know, fundamentally, we could not be more different in terms of some of those things. She likes going to museums. She likes looking at art. She loves to draw. She likes musicals. And as I go down that checklist of those things that she likes and enjoys doing, you know, there were very few that I could even tolerate when I first met her. She loves drinking coffee. When I first met her, I only drank water. I drank water all the time. And so coffee was dirty water to me. It was bitter, nasty. Why would I want to do that? And now, if you ask me today, how is coffee? I say, well, coffee's really good. And why is that? Because I learned to like that. But there are some things that she likes that I'll never learn to like. She goes, one of her favorite things to do is to go to used clothing stores, op shops in Australia, and go and find things. Any kind of shopping with me goes this way. For about 30 minutes, I'm okay. But when you get that 31-minute mark, the glaze comes over. And there's two things that happen after that point. I've learned to train myself because she's realized this. There's two things that happen. She either asks me and I always say yes, or she asks me and I always say no after that 30-minute mark. Can I have this? Can I? No. Or yes. And so I've learned just to go ahead and say no. Because I get like that. I just don't like it. And then on the other side of the column, when I think about things that I like and things that I enjoy, I love to hike. I love to camp. I'm an outdoorsy kinds of person. She doesn't like any of those things. Nothing could be further from her mind. The first time that she ever stayed in a tent was after we were married, and in terms of real camping. Before they went camping in Tasmania, and her family brought cots and all these kind of things and made it very nice. The first time that she actually got down there and slept on the ground was after we had gotten married. And so all these things, very different. We went on a hike together, and we started along the hiking trail, and for about the first 30 minutes, 45 minutes, she was okay. But then about the hour mark, then she got the glaze going over. Not really, actually. She got the, I want to go back, just not really very happy with the whole experience. All right, so in terms of the compatibility aspect, there were a number of areas where we were just, it just didn't work. But there was more to it than that, because we realized that there was another level, isn't it? And those kind of things that you can learn to like, you can learn to grow, you can learn to change. I drink coffee. I will sit through musicals. There are a couple of musicals that I'll even enjoy, not very often, but a few that I do enjoy. We watched the Music Man together a while back. Music Man's pretty nice if you haven't seen that one. But anyway, better along these lines than finding someone that you're attracted to and finding someone that you're compatible with is someone who is godly. Because if you have that right, that's the big thing. That's where all of the arguments, that's where all the disagreements come from. Because a Christ-like person is going to be a servant person. A person who is going to do what Christians do, who's going to put your needs first. And so even where there are issues of friction or issues of incompatibility, a Christ-like person is going to work through those issues with you. The best kind of way of looking for a marriage partner, though, is this: to be someone who is godly first, and then to look for someone who is godly. It is perfectly right if you go out there and you only have these external criteria and you get married to that person, that marriage will not be sinful, but it will not be the best either. If you be a godly person and you find a godly person, that's the best kind of marriage that you can possibly have. Let's talk about, though, being a godly person, and realize this, that the reality is that while I consider others in marriage, others are considering me. You know, employers do this now. They can type your name into Google, and they can look up and see what kind of person you are. Do you know that people, when they're considering dating you, are doing the same thing? My wife knows people, both men and women, who have said, I would never date that person just because of their Facebook page, just because of the things they say, just because of the pictures they put up. And so people are watching you. People are seeing what kind of person you are. And so if you want to find the right kind of person, you have to be the right kind of person. What are good people looking for? What are good men looking for if I'm a woman? What are good women looking for if I am a man? What are these people looking for? Well, I want us to open up to the Song of Solomon. And there are a number of ways of interpreting the book Song of Solomon. A number of ways, and many of them fall short. This is a book that is highly poetical, and it's quite likely that there are changes of point of view, changes in speakers that happen throughout it that make everything very difficult. But the overall point of the Song of Solomon is to give us a sort of guidebook, a sort of handbook, as it were, to dating, to romance, to marriage. And it helps us to understand that human sexuality is not something that God forbids, not something that God simply allows, but something that God has created to be enjoyed within the boundary of marriage. And this book will declare that to us as we study it in this kind of overview fashion. But Song of Solomon opens up in Song of Solomon chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. Verse 2, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. Seems to be that she's looking back at at this situation after she is already married, and she's enjoying, by the way, before I put the next verse up there, she's looking back at her marriage, and as she's considering her relationship with her husband, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. She desires her husband. There's a healthy love there for her husband. Now, what is that love based on? Verse 3. Because of the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. Now, as you consider this passage with me, there are a couple of things that I want to take out of that. What do you see in these two verses? First of all, you see attraction. You see, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. And there's no getting around that. I know, and like I said, there's going to be a number of times where you all are kind of squirming in your seats, but if you don't enjoy, men and women who are married, if you don't enjoy kissing your spouse, or in whatever way you express affection to your spouse, if you don't enjoy that, then there is something seriously wrong with your relationship. I promise you. You're missing out on something. And I know that expression of emotion, and in fact, what the survey found, I'm not aware of the survey, I'm only aware of the commercial that talks about it. The survey found that in relationship to emotions, where are Singaporeans at? You are the least emotionless people in the world, according to that survey. Yong Yao says, yes, I've been working very hard at that, trying to be unemotional. Oh, all right. Even though you've had years of training in keeping yourself restrained and not showing public displays of affection, all of the above, if at the end of the day you don't go home and enjoy the affectionate language of kissing and love with your wife or your husband, there is something wrong with your marriage, something that needs to be worked on, because you're missing out on something that God has put there for you to enjoy. Now, you see attraction, but notice why that attraction is. There's a surface level reason for the attraction. Because of the savor of thy good ointment, she likes the way he smells. You know, as mind-numbingly strange as it is to me, My wife likes the way that I smell. You know, it's strange, it's odd. And you know, there are times where I'll smell a smell in the air, and I'll go, Chantel. And why is that? Because some woman is wearing her perfume. I like the way that she smells. And there's this sort of attraction based upon that. Now that's, as you think about that, that's just one area obviously, but what kind of attraction is that? It's a surface level attraction. The way a person smells can change with the kind of perfume, cologne, shower they've had or have not had along those lines. If you don't believe me, go on the MRT. Sometimes you're standing next to people on the MRT and, whew, I don't know what's happening there. Obviously not deodorant or cologne or perfume. But anyway, she likes the way that he smells. But notice that there's a deeper than surface level reason also for that attraction. Thy name is as ointment poured forth. It's because of thy name that the virgins do love thee. When the Shulamite, and that's the only name that we have for this woman who is the partner of Solomon in this book. When the Shulamite speaks of Solomon, people say, you got a good catch. Where can I find a man like that? And why is that? Now, when you're picturing Solomon in terms of this book, realize that yes, Solomon did take a bad turn later on in his life. He married foreign women, had a multitude of spouses, and he gave himself over to the idolatry of these foreign wives as gods. He allowed his heart to be changed by those whom he married. But that was at a later point in his life, at least in my way of understanding. Earlier on in his life, in fact, you see him when he takes the kingship, isn't it? What does he ask for? He doesn't ask for riches. He doesn't ask for honor. He doesn't ask for fame. He doesn't ask for great things. He asks to have wisdom. He wants to have wisdom because this is a great task that God has set before him, and he wants to be able to do a good job with it. He's interested in preserving his name. Now, there is something in a name. In Proverbs chapter 22, it says in verse 1, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. What makes people love you? What makes people extend to you loving favor? The fact that you have a good name. And to have a good name is more precious, more desirable than anything else that you could possibly have. Let's talk for a little while about creating a good name. If I'm going to be the kind of person who is dateable, the kind of person who the right person out there, Mr. Right, Mrs. Right, is looking for, and I mean Mr. Right, Mrs. Right, that's a godly Christian. If I'm going to be that kind of person, I need to have a good name. How do I get it? Well, let's start first of all with the surface. Because as it happened in the Song of Solomon, so it happens even today. There are surface level considerations. But I can tell you that for godly men and women, those surface level considerations are not, he's hot, or she's beautiful, or she's, even worse, sexy along those lines. That is not what we're dealing with when we deal with these surface level considerations. When we want to attract the right kind of person, what do they need to see on the surface? Look at 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 9. 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse number 9. It says, in like manner also, that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with broided hair, or gold, or pearls, or costly array. Now this verse is spoken to those who are obviously women. And the direction to them is that they be modest. Let's think about that first of all. I want you to realize, women, that for many godly men, modesty is a gatekeeper. Modesty is a gatekeeper. You know, one of the things that attracted me to my wife was that no matter how many times I saw her, no matter how many different situations I saw her, I never had to worry about what she was wearing. I never had to worry about her showing off too much. I never had to worry about telling her this or that about how she was dressing. And I found that to be incredibly attractive. What was she showing me more? No, she wasn't showing me more. She was showing me less. But her showing me less was actually, to me, more attractive than if she had shown me more, because of what I was looking for. Do you know, ladies, that when you don't dress modestly, when you don't follow heaven's rule relative to how you should dress, which is shoulders to knees, when that's not your guideline, when that's not how you go out in the when you stand in front of the mirror, that's not the first guideline that you apply to yourself and how you go out. You know, what does that show to the men who are around you? What does that show to godly men? What does that show to other men? Well, first of all, it shows godly men and even some other men that you're a woman that has self-esteem issues. Why is it that ladies wear low-cut tops and shorts or short skirts, or showing their legs, in other words? Why do they do that? I can't believe that some of the things that ladies in Singapore walk around in, I can't believe that those are comfortable. The kind of outfits that they wear, and especially they wear these outfits and then they wear these little tiny heels, and they're walking around and the dress is so tight that I can't believe that that's a comfort issue. I can't believe that is, you know, they think, you know, oh, this is just the relax and wear, you know, what I wear when I want to be comfortable. It's not comfortable at all. Why do they wear that? One reason, because they want people to look at them. Why do they want people to look at them? Because they're not confident. And that might come as a shock to you. You might think, well, ladies who wear those things, well, they are the very picture of confidence. Catwalk models, and how they all very skinny, and they all walk with that same swagger, or that same strut. Very confident, you might think. Well, no, because they gain something by all these eyes looking at them that is not inside of them already. They need the attention. They need people to look. And that says something very deep about their character, doesn't it? What are you saying to people when you don't dress modestly? Second, what it tells a godly man, this is a woman who does not want to save herself for only me. You know, God made it so that men are attracted to women. He made it that way. And He made it so that those parts which God said to be covered, and God showed examples of being covered in the Bible, He made it so that those parts which are covered, men find especially attractive. Why? Because when a man is married to a woman, she shares those parts of her body with him and with him alone. Open your Bibles to Proverbs chapter 5, verses 18 and 19. Some of these squirm-worthy texts, but they're still in your Bible. Proverbs chapter 5, verses 18 and 19. In verse 15, realize that in chapters 1 through 9 of the book of Proverbs, this is a father speaking to his son and trying to prepare his son for life. And one of the things that he tells his son to do is, in verse 15, to drink waters out of your own cistern, running waters out of your own well. What does that mean? Is he talking there about only taking waters from your physical, literal, actual well? No, he's not. In fact, he's actually talking about his wife to be. In verse 18, let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let her be as the loving hind and the pleasant roe. Let her breasts satisfy thee at all times. Be thou ravished always with her love. There are parts of the female anatomy that God made for men to be attracted to, but only for a husband to be attracted to. He is told, be ravished with her body. Enjoy her body. Now, how can he possibly do that when he knows that she is sharing that with every single other person that walks along on the street? No, she's not kissing them. No, she's not committing fornication with them. But what is she doing? She is sharing what belongs to him to others. Godly men don't want that. They do not want that. I did not want that. And I know others wouldn't want that either. But further, When a woman dresses immodestly, he is telling the world, or rather she is telling the world, don't trust me. Because part of being married is a sacred trust, knowing that what belongs to my spouse, I will only give to my spouse. And so the person who doesn't dress modestly is putting these things on display. And what will that inevitably create? You know, the woman can say, well, oh, he shouldn't be looking. Well, if you have to say he shouldn't be looking, then it's the case that there's something showing that he shouldn't be looking at. Doesn't that make sense? There's obviously something on display that he shouldn't be looking at if you have to say he shouldn't be looking. And so what are then you saying to your future spouse? You're saying you can't trust me. But instead of that, in Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 11, we're going to have a look at that in more detail later. The heart of the virtuous husband, rather the husband, trusts the virtuous woman. He is able to trust her. He knows what she's going to do. He knows how she's going to carry herself. He doesn't have to worry about what she's going to do around people of the opposite sex. Now, you say, well, what about men? I mean, obviously, modesty does exist for men, but it's not the greatest temptation. You know, when I wake up in the morning, it's only a matter of pulling out pants and a shirt. It's not really that difficult. There's not a great deal of thought process that goes along with it. Oh, maybe there's a little bit when I pick out a tie that somewhat matches the rest of the outfit. But there's really not much worry about making an outfit modest or trying to be, above God's standard for a man, generally speaking. But there is a time when men's clothing does speak volumes. For men, some godly women will never even consider a man whose Sunday dress does not reflect respect. You know, there are some men who, when they come to Sunday worship, they thumb past. And I know some of you guys have this stuff, because when you come on from work on Wednesday night or at other congregations on different nights for their midweek, I've seen some men who on those midweek nights will actually dress better than they will dress on Sunday. Why is that? Because they've come from work. And when they come from work, they're already wearing nice clothing. And they're not going to go home and change. I'm a man, I know that. You're not going to go home and change for midweek service. You're just going to wear out the clothes for the day. And so you go and you're wearing these nice clothes. But on Sunday, you're like, oh, finally a day of the week where I get the choice to pick what I want to wear. And so you thumb past all of your nice clothes that you wear during the week, and then you pull out the rattiest looking t-shirts and the ugliest looking pairs of pants, and you say, well, I hope they lead the song today, just as I am. Just as I am, Lord. I don't want to change anything, just as I am. Well, do you realize that godly women are looking for men who give their best to God? I don't agree with everything that the rock group from the 80s, ZZ Top, did or said, but ladies go crazy for a sharp-dressed man. Have you ever heard that song before? Maybe not. I don't know. American joke, sorry. But along those lines, men who know how to put their best foot forward on Sunday, it says something to women. Godly women realize that. And so men, what are you doing to prepare yourself for that fact? How are you presenting yourself along those lines? Now, obviously along those lines, we have to dig deeper than the surface. And so along those lines, remind yourself of the fact that thy name is as ointment poured forth. It's not just about the surface level considerations. When you dig deeper than the surface, there has to be something there. Well, in another version of verse 3, the New American Standard Version renders it this way: your oils have a pleasing fragrance. Your name is like purified oil. And I find that very interesting. Your name is like purified oil. In those days, they did not have the modern ways of deriving oil, chemical processes or things along these lines. How did they get oil? To get oil in those days, to get pure oil, you would take ripe olives and you would press them. And so pressed olives makes oil. Your name is like pure oil, is like pressed olives, you could say, along those lines. Having a name like purified oil points to the concept of character. Character is what you are under any circumstance. And that's what it takes to have a good name. To have a good name, even when you are being pressed, what should come out of you? Not anger, not blaspheming, not discouragement, not a loss of faith. What should come out of you is confidence, faithfulness, obedience to the word of the Lord. What should come out of you is pure oil. Now, as you think about building up character, think about these questions. I'm going to ask you some broad questions, and those of you who are dating, ask these to yourselves. Now, I realize, by the way, those of you who are married, you might think, well, I can tune out because I'm married and I've already got all this figured out. Well, as a process of developing in marriage, let me back up. Marriage is a process of development, all right? And if you're not growing in your role in marriage, well, then what are you doing? You're dying. If you're not getting better, what are you doing? You're getting worse. It should be that as you get older, your marriage gets better because you are getting better. And if each of you two get better, then the marriage will get better. All right, now think about this from the standpoint of broad questions, character development. Do I constantly and consistently wear the name Christian? Or is it something that I hide? You know, and I'll just again hit on this point because I feel like we people up here, Brother Eddie, myself, Brother Young, we say these kind of things all the time. But how often is it that what we portray to the world is not Christian? And out on the most obvious of platforms, Facebook. I can say things until I'm blue in the face about that, but it just doesn't seem to sink in. And I'm speaking to you all because I need to do so. Because these things, my wife constantly comes to me with these things and asks, what should I do? This person from the church has put this onto their page. And I'll look at that and I'll say, no way is that in harmony with God's Word. No way is that declaring to the world, I am a Christian. There will be profanity. There will be immodesty. There will be unwise and unchristian-like conduct. Portray it as though it's a good thing. Posts that haven't been read or considered, reposted. Now, I can say all of that till I'm blue in the face. But at some point, if you want to be the kind of person that a godly person is going to seek, you're going to say, I need to wear this name all the time. And the image that I portray always needs to be the image of Christ living in me. Every single time. When we suffer, we're to suffer as Christians. And it says in that passage in 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 16, close of that passage, it says, we should glorify God in this name. Do I act differently around different groups of people? Now, I realize, and you probably would as well, that sometimes you do act differently around different groups of people, but as a way of accommodating. It's not really that you're changing who you are, it's just that you're changing sometimes the way you act. For example, people who don't know me very well would think that I'm a very serious person. That seems to be the way that people kind of view me. I'm a very serious person. So much so that when I actually tell a joke or say something, people will always take me, and because I'm a stone-faced Swayne, I don't have much emotion that comes across. I'll say a joke, and people will be like, well, he's being serious in that. And sometimes people get upset at me about that. But really, all that is, until I know you, I act pretty plain. And then when I feel comfortable with you, then I'll act a bit less reservedly. It doesn't change who I am, it just changes the way I act because of the situation. Now, that's different than saying that a person is Christian-like around the people that matters to, and unchristian-like around people that the other matters to. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 9, Paul said that we need to let our love be without dissimulation. The word dissimulation there is the word hypocrisy. And actually what that is in the original language, it's the word that we get our word hypocrisy from with a no in front of it. So not hypocritical or not a hypocrite. What is a hypocrite? A word study of that will reveal that a hypocrite is a person who wears two masks. An actor. In fact, the Greeks used that word hypocrite to refer to an actor. Someone who would pretend to be something. We are not to be people who pretend to be anything. We are to be who we are. And obviously it should be again that Christ is living in us. How do I behave under pressure? You know, there are some people, and I've gotten really embarrassed before around some Christians. I remember I was attending a lectureship / it was called a mission forum, and the church had booked a hotel for us, and one of the deacons took us over to this hotel, and the lady was getting the room and everything, and then when it came time for him to get the bill, they had charged the wrong rate. And he absolutely laid into this woman, just absolutely yelling and shouting and obviously very angry. And you know, if you know anything about customer service in the United States, particularly in the South, particularly in hotels and these kind of things that are not the upper crust of hotels, they don't really care. So here he is shouting and getting angry, and she's like, uh-huh. Well, what do you want me to do about that? You know, it doesn't even have an impact. And he's shouting and getting angry. And what is that declaring to this person? She knows that this booking is for the Church of Christ. What is that declaring to this person? Well, that Christianity doesn't really mean a whole lot. How do you act when things don't go your way? How do you act when the pressure is on? When there is a test upcoming, when there is some kind of job interview or something that you care a lot about that's on your schedule very soon. How do you act in those times? How do you act under pressure? Think again about the olive. What happens when it's squeezed? It should be that good oil, pure oil comes out. But what comes out of you? The kind of language and the kind of things that come out of some people. The complaining. Murmuring and complaining is a big problem in this country, isn't it? Is it sinful or not? You tell me. Sinful or not? It's sinful. Being content in every state, is that something we're supposed to be? Yeah. We are supposed to be able to take any situation that life throws at us, and whether we are having a bad day or things are not going our way, there's something to be learned. If we're doing well, if things are going our way, then there's something to be given. But at the same time, it shouldn't be that we are people who are changed by our situation. Job was a servant of God, and what did he say? When I am tried, I shall come forth as pure gold. That should be us. We should be the kind of people who, when we are tried, we only get better. Do my decisions reflect a kingdom-first mentality? Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. When I make decisions, when I choose where to go on vacation, when I choose what jobs to take, when I choose what amount of my life or time I give to this or that or the other, if I miss services, if I don't miss services, how much I express my generosity to those around me, and so on. Do my decisions, do my actions reflect a kingdom-first mentality? Now, there's so much more that we could say by way of these broad kinds of questions, but I want you to realize something. One of my favorite motivational speakers, not a religious speaker really, his name is Zig Ziglar. I don't know if you ever heard of Zig Ziglar. He had this thing called the Goals Program, and in the Goals Program he said that you need to turn your wandering generalities into meaningful specifics. And what we've just talked about, these broad concepts, are wandering generalities. But the nuts and bolts of how that actually looks and how it works, you'll never get there with that. But the news flash I want you to realize is that godly people are already looking for specific things. This is something that is put together, and it's being handed out to young godly Christians in the U.S., and I hope it's being handed out in other places as well. Cindy Colley made this up. I don't know if it's original to her, but that's where my wife got it from. They're called dating check cards. And that my wife has shared these with the girls at 4Cs. So guys, you'll never get anywhere with these ladies at 4Cs unless you meet these checkpoints, all right? They already have the information. And godly people are already thinking these kind of thoughts. So the dating check card for girls goes like this. And of course, this is for girls to use on boys, all right? Does he speak respectfully to and about his parents? Godly people are looking for that. They want to know, how does this child or how does this son respect authority? Because if he doesn't respect the authority of his parents, he's not really going to have much respect for any kind of authority, namely that of his heavenly Father. Does he pray before eating? Do you see him when he goes to the hawker's stall as he gets his meal before he eats? He bows, he pauses, he thinks about where it came from, and he gives thanks to the one who gave it. Do you see, or is he careful with the entertainment choices he makes? Is there any kind of filter? You know, the kind of things that we watch in the movie theaters, we would not dare to allow people right in front of us to do that. When you think about it, the kind of clothes that they wear, the things that they do, would you allow someone right in front of you to do that? No. And ladies, notice something. You know, we've gone out with Christians before, and we've seen a movie, and our policy, obviously, with these movies is, we have guidelines, but if there are small contained portions that are bad, then we are willing to overlook those. But here's how we overlook those. If there's an immodest man, you know what my wife does? She goes like this. She doesn't watch that part. If there's an immodest a woman, I go like this. I don't watch that part. If there's too much swearing, the movie gets turned off. No matter what, we have these guidelines in place. But I say all that to say this: we were with a group of Christians, and in that part where there was something bad that came up, a lady wasn't dressed like she should be, I looked this way, and my wife looked at the people that we were with, and those men were sitting there, not even a change. No filter whatsoever. Just lapping up whatever Satan wants to put on the screen. There needs to be a filter. Does he avoid physical compromises in dealing with the opposite sex? Watch the way he acts. You know what? And this will be true. We're going to look at the women's card as well. Watch the way she acts. You know, the woman who's overly flirtatious, the woman who is always batting her eyelids, that kind of woman. Watch how she puts herself into compromising situations, or watch how he does the same. You know, it wasn't very uncommon, unfortunately, in the kind of youth groups that I grew up with, at least at one congregation I attended. You know, you would see young men and women, and the woman the girl would be sitting in the guy's lap before they were married. That's not a good idea. That's really, really, really not a good idea. Compromising situations. I don't know what happens at YDP. I've never been. But look at how people handle themselves around those of the opposite sex. Does he like to talk about the Scriptures? It should be that you're able to have a conversation with him about the Bible. And another newsflash, if you can't have a conversation about the Bible, then you're not the kind of person you need to be. So you should be able to talk to him about the Bible. Is there someone he's trying to convert to Christ? Does he talk to you about this friend that he's trying to bring to Christ? Does he sing out in worship? And a lot of these relate to worship, and it's very interesting because godly men and women, they're going to be exposed to each other primarily at church. Does he sing out in worship? Does he take notes during the sermon? Does he like to sit toward the front? Or is he slouching off in the back? Sorry, young yo. Just joking. He always seems to sit at the back. But I think he sits at the back so that no one can get into the back. He's guarding the back and keeping it from everyone else. All right, keep it up. Does he avoid alcoholic beverages? Does he control his anger and profanity? Obviously, men, being the way we are, that God made us, we have testosterone running through our veins. It makes us angry, all right? And so, do we control that? Is he a faithful Christian? Now, this is the one that was given for boys, obviously, to use on girls. And there's going to be a lot of similarities here, and we'll skip through those. But can she be happy when she's not the center of attention? Can she be happy when she's not the center of attention? Again, with the way she treats her parents. She careful in her entertainment choices. She careful in dealing with the opposite sex. Does she like talking about the Scriptures? Is there someone that she is trying to convert to Christ? Does she sing out in worship? Does she take notes? Does she sit in the front? Does she avoid alcohol? Does she dress modestly? It's an important thing. Is she discreet about sexual matters? Is she a faithful Christian? And so as you're thinking about these things, godly people are already looking for certain kinds of people. And so if you want to be the kind of people who ends up with them, then you've got to keep these things in mind. And you've got to put your best foot forward to be the right kind of person so that someone, when they're looking for someone, will consider you. Now, godly people love people with a good name. Your name is like purified oil. Therefore, the maidens love you. Godly people love people with a good name. Now, In our remaining time, I want to talk about shaping myself into God's image for me. Shaping myself into God's image for me. And this is one of those things where I wish I could spend a lot more time. And one of those things where, as a matter of consequence, we're just going to have to kind of rush pretty quickly through. But with all of these things, these slides are available to you. And if you ever want to talk more about any of these things, I'm more than happy to talk to you about them. One of the things to realize about the Bible is that it is not gender neutral. The Bible shows the creation of gender roles. In other words, it gives gender roles. The Bible also guides men and women as to how they should be within their gender roles. And it also guards those roles so that they are not crossed over. If you read the list of sins in 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11, you're going to find that being one who transcends those gender roles, who crosses over, even that very action without homosexuality is sinful to God. So, along those lines, not gender neutral, the Bible does tell you how to be a woman, women. And the Bible does tell you how to be a man, men. The Bible's key text for His ideal woman, God's ideal woman, is Proverbs 31. And the fantastic thing about Proverbs 31, if you read it, it starts in verse 10. But if you read all the way back at verse 1, where did Proverbs 31 come from? It came from Lemuel's mother. This is a mother telling her son, this is what you look for. And again, godly men have figured this out. And so if godly men are looking for this, if the Bible tells them they need to look for this, then women already need to be considering, how can I shape myself into being this? How can I be this kind of person? Proverbs 31 tells about the woman that she is. What kind of woman exactly is a woman that is a Proverbs 31 kind of woman? Well, of course, she has roles that are given to her by God, created by God. In Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 11, what is she? She is a wife. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her. And that's how she's introduced, by the way. She is a wife. One of the first things that's said about her. But in addition to being a wife, she is also, of course, a mother. In verse number 28, her children arise up and call her blessed. And so, again, you're seeing God's plan for the ideal woman. She's got a husband, and she has children along those lines. She's a daughter. In verse 29, many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. And the best possible thing as you consider this text is this: when you start as a daughter, prepare yourself to be the right kind of wife and mother. God created all three roles, and He wants to see you develop and mature into the woman that you should be. Proverbs 31 also identifies the work that this woman does. She's not a lazy woman. In fact, in verse 13, she seeks wool and flax, and she works willingly with her hands. In verse 19, she lays her hand to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She's a person who works. In the context of the home here, she is making things. This is what we would call a cottage industry. And she's going out and she's selling these things. And in fact, as far as taking care of her home, in verse 27, she looks well to the ways of her households and eats not the bread of idleness. She's not lazy. But one of the things that ought to strike you, and hopefully not puzzle you, and hopefully not discourage you, but one of the things that should strike you in this cultural context in which feminism is pumped to the extreme, all right? In Singapore, feminism is pumped to the extreme, to where the goals and aspirations and desires of men and women are exactly the same, isn't it? The same education, the same pay grade, the same jobs, the same goals in life. That's not how God made you. You might think, cruel, unusual, barbaric. God did not make you to have the same goals as men. And that's not wrong. And I want you to hear this from me. It's not wrong for a woman to work outside the home. Certainly not. Inasmuch as it's also not wrong to marry a non-Christian. But in that, do you realize that the more that you give to your work, the less you have to give to your home? And you are the guard of the home. God made you that way. Proverbs 31 does allow for a woman who works outside the home. Absolutely. But do not hone in on those texts and ignore everything else in the entire passage. It glorifies, it promotes the kind of woman who puts her home first. That's God's ideal woman. She works for her husband. In verses 11 and 12, the heart of her husband does safely trust in her so that he will not have need of spoil. There are some men who are worried about spoil. They have to worry about, where am I going to get my next paycheck from, because she's going to spend it. That's not a godly woman. That shouldn't be the concern of a godly man. In verse 12, she will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She works also for her home. And think about how much she does for her home. Does she have servants? Yes. But it's so interesting to find that she actually serves her servants. Notice in verse number 14, she is like merchant ships. She brings food from afar. She does the grocery shopping. And in verse 15, she rises also while it is yet night. She gives meat to her household and a portion to her maidens. Who are they? The servants, the slaves, the workers. She's actually taking care of the servants. And how reverse, whacked out, and crazy and insane is it when in churches of Christ, I haven't seen it in Singapore, but I've seen it in Malaysia, when Church of Christ's services, worship services, and the ladies are all sitting there, and instead of the servants, the domestic helpers, being in there worshiping with them, they're in the kitchen making the meal, the fellowship meal. Not even allowed to worship with others. How reversed, how whacked out, how crazy is that picture from the picture that you see here, where this woman is actually waking up before the servants to take care of them. In fact, going along with that, she considers a field. She is business savvy. She does help to invest the money for the family. She considers a field. She buys it. With the fruit of her hand, she plants a vineyard. There she is working outside of the home. She's investing the money for the home. In verse 17, though, she girds her loins with strength, and she strengthens her arms. In verse 18, she perceives that her merchandise is good. Her candle goes not out at night. She gets up early in the morning. She stays up late at night. There are women who do manage to juggle the having of a career, not the breadwinner for the house, but having some kind of work outside the home, taking care of the home, juggling all those things that they have to do. And people say, how do you do it? How do you do it? And the reality is that us men have no clue, so I can't give you an answer. But it does happen. But not when she's got her priorities wrong. Not when her goals are the same as men. Not when she is not trying to look to the ways of her home. In verse 21, she's not afraid of snow for her household. When cold weather comes, which it won't ever in Singapore, but think about whatever the application might be for you. When snow comes, when difficult times come, she's not worried for her household because all of her household is clothed in the best. She's looked after them. She has cared for them. In verse number 24, she makes fine linen, she sells it, she delivers girdles unto the merchant. She works to bring income into the home. In verse number 27, she looks well to the ways of her household. That's ultimately what all of her goals, all of her desires are pointed towards. And how often is it, and sadly so, that ladies will hold these jobs, they'll work all of these hours, and when they get to work after dropping off the screaming kids at daycare, they'll say, it feels good to be at work so I can relax for a little while. It's so backwards. And it's missing out on something very precious and important. Because those children are going to grow up without a mother. And that is a tragedy. Children should grow up knowing that their father is working and providing for them. But if their mother is doing the exact same thing and they don't have time with any parent at all, don't be surprised how they turn out. And don't be surprised as the Lord's church gets weaker and weaker. It happened in the U.S. It'll happen here. Everywhere in the world where parents dive into work and forget about the home, families are ruined and souls are lost. She works also for those around her. She stretches out her hand to the poor. She reaches forth her hands to the needy. She does care for her home, but she's also looking after others. And also, now as we continue along in this, think about the wardrobe that she owns. Of course, she does clothe herself well. In verse 22, she makes herself coverings of tapestry or clothing of silk and purple. She worries about how she's presenting herself to the world. Yes, she is concerned with appearances along these lines. But notice what her real clothing is. It's not the outward adorning that really matters to her the most. In verse 25, strength and honor are her clothing. And because of that, she shall rejoice in time to come. Think about the words that she speaks. In verse number 26, it says, she openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. And therefore the worth that she brings. In verse 10, who can find a virtuous woman? Her price is far above rubies. In verse number 23, her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. In verse number 28, her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, he praises her. And in verse 30, favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. That's God's ideal woman. Now, without having much time to pause for thought, let's go on and talk about God's ideal man. Ladies have often lamented the fact that there's no Proverbs 32. Where is the virtuous man? Well, God realized that. And so He said, I'm going to give you a virtuous man. And you know where that virtuous man is found? 1 Timothy 3 and Titus chapter 1. God identified a virtuous man in setting forth the goals for each man that He gave. You might call them the guidelines for creating elders, but there's a total other way of looking at them. I want you to think about the virtuous man in light of his home. What kind of man is he? He is the husband of one wife. What does that mean? 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2. We'll put fingers there in 1 Timothy 3 and also Titus chapter 1. Flip back and forth between the two. What does it mean that he is the husband of one wife? A literal translation of that is he is a one-woman man. He's the kind of person who is devoted to his wife. Now, obviously, if you're looking for a person that's, not married, he's not going to be a one-woman man yet. But he's going to be the kind of person who is not going to be dating and breaking up and breaking every girl's heart in the church. What's he going to be doing? He is going to, like you, be looking forward to having one meaningful relationship that produces one meaningful marriage that lasts for one lifetime. That's the kind of man you're looking for, ladies. A one-woman man. He's a leader. You know, when you think about the characteristic given to him in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse number 4, he is one who rules well his own house. A young Christian man does not have a house yet. What are you looking for? You're looking for him to take up positions of leadership within the church. You're not looking for him to sit on the back seat. You're not looking for him to be the last one to raise his hand. He's on the forefront. He's the one who's volunteering first. He's a leader. Not only that, but in achieving spiritual goals, he's successful. Now, the goal that's mentioned in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 4 is to have his children in subjection with all gravity. And in Titus chapter 1 and verse 6, to have faithful children along those lines. But what is having faithful children but a goal that every godly man should have? And what kind of goal is it? It's a spiritual goal. Is he the kind of man who sets spiritual goals for himself? Bible reading schedules, numbers of attracting sessions attended, numbers of church sessions attended, going and attending a part-time class at 4Cs, plug, all right? He is trying to advance himself spiritually, and you see him succeeding in that. Not only that, he is generous. In 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2, you see hospitality, and that same echoed in verse 8 of Titus chapter 1. Hospitality. Now, if he doesn't have a home, he can't open it up. But what can you see him doing, and what should you see him doing? Opening up his wallet. He's not stingy. He doesn't hold back. He's not flippant or careless with his money. But when there's a visitor coming from out of town, he says, it's on me. I'll pay for it. Christian brother or sister that's visiting, I'll take care of it. You see him being generous. When there's a disaster relief box up here, you don't look and see how much money's in his hand, but you see him walking up at the front and putting something in. He's generous. Not only that, as you consider his habits, he is a student of God's book. In Titus chapter 1 and verse 9, what kind of person is an elder? He is one who holds fast the faithful word. The only way you get to be the person who holds fast the faithful word is if you be a person that studies that word. He, in fact, uses the word of God to grow and to mature. In 1 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 6, he is not a novice. Well, how in the world can you not be a novice? If you take steps of growth, if you mature. And so he's using the Word of God to grow. He is not only growing, but you see him already with whatever talents and abilities he has, trying to be a teacher of the book. He's telling other people about it. If he has that gift, he's speaking publicly. He might not have that gift, but he is telling people about the book. In 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 6, he's apt to teach. He is on the lookout for spiritual dangers. He's not one who is going to be overtaken by something. He knows when he goes into the movie theater that there are going to be spiritual dangers in any Hollywood presentation today. And so he knows that when those scenes come up that he's not supposed to look at, he turns his head away. He is vigilant. He's watchful. He's on the guard. He doesn't give himself over to vices and bad habits. Not given to wine, certainly, but not given over to anything. Not gambling, not smoking, not drinking. He is not a person who engages in those things. In terms of his habits, he also knows how to control his temper. He's not a brawler. He's not a striker. He's not someone who's going to yell at you the moment that you do something wrong. But instead, what is he going to do? He's going to be patient. He's developed the art of patience, of listening first, rather than speaking, rather than getting angry, just like James said. Not only that, but he is also in control of himself. Titus chapter 1 and verse 8, he is temperate. He is of good behavior. But in terms of all of these things, he'll have a good reputation or a good name. Now, what about his heart? More than anything, he wants to be right. Blameless characterizes him. He wants to be just. He wants to be righteous. He wants to be blameless. It's not that you don't see him making mistakes, but it is that you see him admitting those mistakes, and it is that you see him apologizing for those mistakes and making corrections to his life. You see him that he knows when to be serious. He's sober. He knows when to be serious. Yeah, he can be funny. He can have a sense of humor, but he knows when to be serious. He is not driven by money, not after filthy lucre. He's not covetous, and therefore there's no greed in his heart. He's not self-willed. He's not prideful. None of these things are characteristics of him. But instead, he loves the church and all things that are good. He's a lover of good. Now, the King James Version there in Titus chapter 1 and verse 8 says, lover of good men. The men is in italics. He's a lover of good. A lover of good men, a lover of good. He loves the church. Am I ready to date? This is going to be a very brief point, and then the lesson will be yours. I know we've had to rush through some of these things, and again, I wanted to put this out here, make you aware of it, get you thinking about it. We can't correct your dating habits in one night. We can't correct your marriages in one night, all right? All of this that I hope to do over these next few weeks is to open your eyes to the fact that God speaks on this subject. But I want to leave you with these 4 points, and this is not original to me, but before I do that, again remind you that modern dating is practiced for divorce. So before you take the step to date, think about these 4 things. This is from Tommy Nelson. Tommy Nelson is a denominational man, but I think that you'll agree with these 4 points that he wrote on when are you ready to date and marry. First, you are ready to date and marry when you have a silhouette. And the silhouette is not men, and I don't know if you do inches here for ladies' figures. What is it, 36, 24, 36? The hour? No, here in Singapore, it's not the hourglass figure. If a lady has the hourglass figure in Singapore, you think she's fat. So it wouldn't be 36, 24, 36. It would be what? 24, 24, 24 in Singapore. Well, anyway, that silhouette is not physical. That silhouette is not physical, as we're going to be talking about next week. You have a picture, a rough outline, a dark image, no face filled in, no physical features identified of what kind of person you want based upon their character, based upon their name. Now, second, you are ready to date and marry when you do not have to compromise any aspect of your relationship with God in order to be with the person to whom you are attracted. There are young men out there who will try to take from you, ladies, what you can't give. Don't compromise. There are young ladies out there, young men, who want to take from you what you cannot give. Do not compromise. Do not give in. If they're the kind of person who wants to take what you can't give, then they're not the kind of person that you need to date, let alone the kind of person you should consider marrying. Third, you are ready to date and marry when you are willing to be single rather than make a bad choice of a marriage partner. You'll find that when you don't become boy crazy or girl crazy, but you apply yourself to God and His Word, not that you give up. Now, there are some people who have this kind of backwards, and they think that God's going to work like this, that they're just going to go about doing their Christian thing, and Mr. Right's going to come knocking on the door with a wedding ring. Or Mrs. Right's going to come, fall from the sky, this godly woman, she's going to be there right in front of you. You didn't even realize it, but all of a sudden she's there. That's not the way it works. As we're going to talk about next week, you pray, give us this day our daily bread. And what do? You go out and get it. You pray, give me a godly husband, give me a godly wife. And I'm not saying you go out and get it, but what do? You engage in the active pursuit of getting to know young Christian men and women, depending upon what your sex is, obviously. Getting to know them with the hope of finding that one that meets your qualities and your qualifications, your silhouette. Then dating, and then marrying. But fourth, you are ready to date and marry when you are becoming the person your ideal mate is praying about meeting. And that's the sticking point tonight, isn't it? You want to be the person someone is praying for. I really like that. And I really hope that's the kind of people that we'll be. Next week, if you'll come back, please do. We're going to be talking about how to select someone. We've looked at ourselves tonight, and we've considered ourselves from the standpoint of God's blueprints. But I want us to then now see next week, how do we get beyond some of these superficial things? The Song of Solomon's going to have some things to say to us about that, and I hope you'll come back. Thank you for your attention.